Thank you so much, Stephen, for that great introduction. And thank you again, Gerald, for joining us today. I think we should get right into it. I hope everyone here has had a chance to look at the membership trends survey. But if not, there is time for networking after the presentation. And if you have questions as we go, please use the Q&A feature. So if you look at the bottom ribbon and hit chat, you'll be able to see Q&A, and we will answer your questions. So Gerald, let's start off by giving us some information about the survey and tell us about the goals of the CSAE membership trend survey.
Sure, happy to do that. Thanks, Lexi, and good afternoon, everyone. This survey took place in late fall last year, and it went out across the CSAE membership, and we were very pleased to have over 200 responses from associations right across the country. So we were very pleased with that. That's a healthy response, and kind of allows anyone who's looking at the report to find themselves somewhere in that report. In other words, if you're a professional association or a industry or business association, we've separated. We had enough interviews, respondents to be able to look at those categories separately. So it was a very comprehensive survey, and our overall goal was just to understand membership trends in 7 key areas. We looked at member recruitment, we looked at onboarding, we looked at member retention, we talked about member value propositions, we looked at engagement, we looked at membership models, and last but not least, we inquired about pricing. So we covered a lot of ground in that survey. And if I'll just give you an example, if we looked specifically at questions around recruitment, we touched on what's your biggest challenge that you're having these days in recruiting members? What's the most effective channel that you're using to recruit members? Do you have a recruitment budget? What is the size of that budget? Do you have a prospect list? What are the sources for your prospect list? How frequently do you update the prospect list? What is the timing for your membership recruitment program? Does it happen all throughout the entire year, or are there specific periods? So as you can tell, I mean, we really kind of tried to cover all the bases. So I think if recruitment is something that you're looking specifically at and wondering about what others are doing, there's more than enough information in there for you to really kind of take a deep dive.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of information. It gives a lot of ideas of new strategies that maybe some associations are not implementing.
So let me just add a little bit more to this.
Yes,
I'm not done yet. It's like, yes. Anyways, I did want to also say, Lexi, that we broke the information down basically every which way to Sunday. So as I said, if you are a small association in terms of staff size or in terms of revenue, we've broken out information that way by size of organization. If you depending on your organization type. We also looked at your geographical scope, for example. But most importantly, I think one of the breakouts that we did was to look at those associations whose membership has been growing in the past 18 months versus those where membership has been static versus those whose membership is declining. So importantly, if you want to see what those organizations with a growing membership are doing that might be different than those with a static membership or declining membership, that information is there. So we can kind of tease out best practices. So I think that's what really kind of gives the information a lot of value.
I am done. Thank you. So sorry. There's so much to say about the topic.
Yes.
So I think we're all trying to know, what are the current trends in membership? Is it increasing, decreasing, remaining static? There's been so much change in the last few years. Can you tell us what the survey results were?
Sure. Yeah. And I would say, just before I kind of dive into this, what we've decided to do today is just for me to address some of these topics, rather than showing you a lot of kind of charts and statistics. We thought it would be kind of better, perhaps more engaging for me just to talk to some of these. So overall trends in membership, roughly 50% of the associations that we spoke to said that their membership has increased in the past 18 months. So that's half have a growing membership. Now, my guess is that what we're seeing in that is a bit of a kind of post-pandemic bounce. So, I mean, I think just, anecdotally, many associations were struggling during the pandemic because they didn't have their usual channels or avenues of recruitment in terms of live events. So I think all of us kind of were challenged in that time period to recruit new members. So I think what's happened is we had a drop off during the pandemic. Post-pandemic, we were getting a bit of a rise. So I think we're seeing that bounce in that 50% who said their membership is increasing. So as I said, we look at those people whose membership is increasing, but we also break out those whose membership has increased by more than 10%. So we have that kind of overachievers in there that you can look at in terms of best practices. We had 35%, about a third, who said, our membership has been flat over the past 18 months. And then we had 15% who said, indeed, our membership is decreasing. So the next logical question is, well, who's growing, who's declining? So what we see is, and this is kind of very generally speaking, it's the larger organizations and it's professional occupational associations that are more likely to be showing that increase in membership. But interestingly, they are also the organizations who believe that they have a very compelling member value proposition. Folks who are seeing declines in their membership tend to be smaller organizations. They're more likely to be trade business organizations. And when asked to rate their member value proposition, they are far more likely to say, our member value proposition is weak or is not very strong. Let's put it that way. So interesting differences in those two groups, increasing versus declining.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I'm hoping you could take some time to tell us now about the common challenges that associations are facing with recruiting new members.
Sure. I think it can really be boiled down to a couple of very key factors, and I would say also, just stepping back for a second and talking about the survey, we did ask a lot of open-ended questions in the survey to try and get at that kind of rich detail. So this was one of these, an open-ended question. What are the challenges that you are having in recruiting new members? Pretty straightforward. And it really, as I said, boils down to two key factors that are intertwined. But number one would be communication. Trying to communicate effectively with potential members. And number two would be selling the benefits of membership. What is the value? How do you convince people the value of membership? I'll just read you a couple of verbatim comments here. Convincing new members that membership is worthwhile, convincing them of the return on investment, demonstrating return on investment. There's a lack of perceived value, showing value. So this, I think, ties in very well with this idea that we touched on a few minutes ago, which was the member value proposition. I think if you ask people about recruiting, but it kind of ripples through other challenges that folks are having beyond just recruiting, but so much of it revolves around value and convincing people that there is value in being a member, that there is a return on investment in being a member. So that would really be it, as I said, value and effectively communicating that value to potential members. But we also asked about, effective channels. What is the most effective channel that you have in your recruitment? And this is not a big surprise, but word of mouth is still kind of number one out there. Other channels include, associations sponsored events and meetings, email, but as I said, I mean, by almost a 2-to-1 margin, word of mouth, is the champion here. So clearly, how do you increase the effectiveness of your word of mouth campaigns? I mean, I think that's the challenge that associations are facing. If word of mouth is the king in terms of recruiting members, how do we increase the effectiveness of word of mouth? We also talked about other recruitment methods, and almost half of the respondents, 50%, claim that conference convention discounts are the most effective method of recruiting new members. This is highest. This hits 71% if you are an association that have seen an increase, a 10% or more increase in your membership in the past 18 months. So.
Well, thank you. That's very interesting. It's interesting to see the rise of in-person events and the value that they have. And we talked about the member value proposition. These are 3 keywords in my everyday life here at CSAE for membership relations.
Yes.
And I'm hoping we could just stay on them for a little bit and discuss maybe any further insights that emerge from the member trend survey.
Sure. So we asked, as I've alluded to before, we asked members to rate their member value proposition. And the question was, in your opinion, how compelling is your member value proposition? And you had, our member value proposition is very compelling. It's compelling. It's somewhat, not very, not at all compelling. And almost 2/3 of the associations participating felt that their MVP was compelling or very compelling. 26% actually said that their member value proposition was very compelling. And we see a very close kind of correlation between those organizations that have seen the largest increase and those that rate their member value proposition as being very compelling. Now, some might say, well, okay, well, that might be a bit of a chicken or egg situation, right? Our membership is going through the roof. Clearly, our member value proposition must be very compelling. Alternatively, I think there's evidence to suggest that those associations with an increased membership and a very compelling member value proposition have really put in the hard work to get a very compelling member value proposition. Because I put forth the fact that these folks are more likely than others to be looking at that member value proposition on an annual basis. So we asked them, how frequently are you looking at it or revising your member value proposition? And we had a percentage who say, we do that every year. If your membership has been declining, you probably haven't. Well, we know that you're more than likely to have not looked at your member value proposition over the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I think, my takeaway from all this is, the importance of your member value proposition, reviewing it, ensuring that it's strong, but reviewing it frequently. Because I think, what we've seen, having lived through the pandemic, post-pandemic, the world has changed so dramatically that if you're using the same kind of member value proposition that you were using pre-pandemic, you're likely out of step a lot of your potential members. So it really does highlight the importance of this particular aspect of, recruitment, retention, engagement, etc.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for expanding on that. So keep it current and communicate it clearly. And if I can add, from the CSAE world, we try very hard to ensure that when we have discussions with a prospective or long-term member, we always bring back these conversations to the proposition and make sure that what we're communicating is relevant to their needs, because sometimes there's things that are very important to them, and then there are things that they're like, oh, I've actually never logged onto that platform or used it, and then you can show them a whole new side to your member benefits. So
right.
Thank you so much.
Well, it's particularly challenged. So I'm just gonna expand on that, and in my experience in the association world, I mean, one of the big challenges I think is the fact that you have such a varied potential audience. You have your younger members who are maybe just entering the workforce, for example, versus members who have been members for many years, and they might be midway through or at the tail end of their career. So all of these audiences, may have slightly different, what they're looking for is going to be somewhat different than others. So it's a huge challenge. My heart goes out to you.
We gotta keep working on it all the time, for sure.
Exactly.
Let's pivot and talk a little bit about member engagement, because that was highlighted in the survey. Can you give us anything that stood out, key takeaways, highlights?
Yeah. Well, sure. And, clearly member engagement, I mean, that surfaces near the top when you look at or talk about challenges. It's an increasing challenge. And I think it was, a huge challenge during the pandemic, when we weren't meeting face to face with our members. And there's certainly got to be a certain kind of carryover from that. We did ask our respondents, do you track member engagement? And I was a little surprised by this, because only half, 50%, 52% in fact, said, yes, we do track member engagement. This percentage is much lower amongst organizations with a flat or decreasing membership. So, I mean, I think that makes sense. If your membership is increasing, you are also, more likely to be tracking member engagement in some form or another. So what are some of the metrics that folks are using to track member engagement? I mean, they include attendance, participation in online, in-person meetings and events, email opens, click-through rates, other CRM type data, and also, survey-based measures. Survey participation, for example, is a good measure of engagement, and responses to specific engagement type questions in surveys is kind of the third most likely tool that people have in their engagement tool belt or tracking engagement. But I would have to say, again, the kind of highlight for me is half of the folks that we interviewed are not doing anything to track engagement, which strikes me as a rather kind of a large number. And I would encourage members to put some metrics in place to allow them to track. Otherwise, how do you know what's working and what isn't working? So, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. We talked a lot about different sections of the survey, and I think it's a great overview. We have one last question. Can you tell us right now, in the face of struggles and challenges that associations are meeting, what are some priorities that they should have in the short term?
Sure. Well, I mean, in fact, we asked this question. It was kind of our wrap-up question. It was, we've talked about, engagement, retention, acquisition, all these things. But what is your focus right now? What are you focusing on over the next 12 months? And, I'll kind of sound like a broken record here, because it does reflect the focus, the desire to, strengthen the member value proposition, to strengthen member engagement, to look at relevance of membership and communicating the relevance of membership. So, I mean, I think that's really what's keeping association directors up at night, is, all of these factors. And, not surprisingly, those with a declining membership are saying, well, that's going to be our focus, is going to be recruitment, is going to be our number one focus over the next 12 months. I guess I would argue you can be focused on recruitment, but first and foremost, you need to be focused on your value and communicating value. And once you get those ducks in a row, then you can kind of take that information and really focus on recruitment. But also people are focused on funding and financial stability, member retention, association resource management. So I think there are many things that are keeping association executives awake at night, but I do think that priority of member value, communication, engagement are the things that over the next 12 months, folks are really going to be looking at very closely.
Thank you so much, Gerald. I know the survey is full of more ideas of what we can do for our membership base, and there's a lot to learn, a lot to digest, and it's really fantastic. I've been through it a few times myself, and every time I'm like, oh, there's an idea. So it's really interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I think, and I just to kind of carry on and underline that fact, and I'll circle back to what I said at the beginning. To me, the key value is looking at that group of people, a group of organizations whose membership has increased, for example, by 10% or more over the past 18 months. I mean, they must be doing something right. And I think there's a lot to learn from that group, and in comparison to folks who are static or have a declining membership. And so it's really kind of zeroing in on, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. They're quite different than, maybe what we've been doing or what the declining membership organizations have been doing. So I think that's a huge value. And second of all, just that ability to look specifically for an organization that sort of replicate, or that group of organizations that will be similar to your organization, whether you're small, large, professional, occupational, what have you. So, yeah, no, we had actually a great time putting this together, because it was kind of like peeling back an onion. It was kind of more that was popping up all the time. So,
oh, that's great. Thank you, Gerald.
Yeah.
I just want to pop in and see if there's any questions. So we have no questions in the chat. I will invite everyone to stay, because we can close the presentation mode. And we have a small group, which is actually great because it lends to more one-on-one discussions. And Gerald is going to thankfully stick around and answer any more questions we have. So thank you so much for being here. And Stephen did put a link to the membership trend survey in the chat if you haven't had a chance to see it. But I just want to thank you again, Gerald, and we'll see you on the floor.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
I'll circulate.
Thanks.